LawFlip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down. LawFlip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down.
Happy Monday. Happy coronavirus Monday. It's been a while since we've been all in our homes. Welcome to LawFlip. It's an unfiltered conversation about law, life, insurance, along with everything in between. So I'm Benjy Smith with my co-host, Louis Benowitz.
Hola!
And look, we have a multi-billion-dollar fight between business owners and their insurance companies, which has flowed into some of the most powerful corners of Washington as both sides fight over who should be responsible for the sky-high cost of the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak. So this fight depends on whether insurance companies should have to pay these claims or whether the companies should have to pay these claims. The dispute has attracted the attention of Mr. President Trump. It's triggered lawsuits in courtrooms across the country and created a lobbying frenzy where some insurers are saying the federal government should pick up the tab, the business owners are saying that the insurers should pick up the tab, the insurance companies are also saying that the companies should pick up the tab. It sounds complicated, so who do we bring in to give us the real deal when it comes to complicated matters? We bring in Nate Braun, a partner at Selman Breitman. I've known Nate for a long time. He was always that kid who was super smart, not egotistical, but he was just savagely smart. He was just that kid you looked at and you said, how the heck is he so smart? So we had to bring him in to deal with these complicated matters. Let's flip the game upside down. Okay, Nate, tell the people, other than dealing with the pandemic and being home with two kids like Louis and myself, give us a little bit of your background and why you're qualified to talk about a subject like this.
I'm not sure that any one person is going to be qualified to talk about a subject like this. There's 1,005 disputes going on all at the same time in every single state, and insurance is generally a state-by-state issue. But I've been practicing insurance coverage for most of my career. I've been with Selman Breitman for 8 years. I'm a partner there. I work on a range of insurance coverage issues, and like pretty much everybody else in the insurance world and really in the outside world, this is something that I've been thinking a lot about, reading a lot about, and focused on really for weeks since the crisis really started rolling.
And you're a partner at 36 years old, and that is a major accomplishment, especially at a firm like yours. What do you think brought you this level of success? What are some of the foundational things that you've done throughout your career to bring you to this level?
I mean, I think it's a combination of things. I think it's hard work, great bosses, and honestly, just a lot of good luck. My practice is a very, academic's the wrong word, but an analytical practice. You're spending a lot of time reading and writing, a lot of research, and a lot of really heavy analysis and thinking.
Do you like that?
About it. I do, yeah. I started out in law school working at an appellate firm, and I worked there after law school. So I from an early time, I was really accustomed to that being a major part of the practice, really digging down on issues and sort of trying to find all the ways to think about it. And that's what's needed in my practice. And that's been a success for me.
Yeah. And whenever I talk to you, I get the sense that you enjoy what you do. And we always talk about how a lot of the lawyers that we know are unfortunately not happy practicing. And so I wonder, what do you think it is that's allowed you to practice as a lawyer and not be miserable?
It depends on the day.
Yeah.
I had a case that was going to trial last September, and it was a case that should have never gone there. I was really frustrated about it. I was frustrated with the judge. I was frustrated with a lot of things. It was, in my view, a nonsense case. And there were a couple times leading up to it where I was like, why the hell do I even do this? And then you finally get it in front of in that case, it was a judge. And the judge sort of finally gets it and realizes and says, hang on. Why are we here? No, that's ridiculous. And then we win the case.
And then you're like, this is exactly what I should be doing.
Well, yeah, winning feels good. I like to win.
Okay, so maybe you could tell me what you do a lot with insurance, and I'm kind of obsessed with insurance because my father-in-law sold insurance for a long time, and I believe in it to an extent. And I also have insurance companies on the other side of disputes all the time. So
right, we believe in insurance, but we believe that insurance companies should be held accountable.
Yes, but Nate Dogg is on the other side of these disputes most of the time. So Nate, you represent insurance companies. Tell us, what is the business of insurance? Why do you like doing it?
Yeah, sure. Just to what you guys are saying, you're right. Insurance is insurers and lawyers representing workers or injured people. They're often on opposite sides of things, but that's the nature of the game. And without one, there really isn't the other. So it's part of the game. What is insurance? Insurance at its core is a financial contract. You purchase an insurance policy from an insurer to cover against a risk, right? Every person, every business faces risks every day. These risks run from mundane, like rear-ending a car in front of you, to extreme, like a freak accident that damages your property or worse, hurts someone. A large loss or a large liability like that could bankrupt you, could really seriously harm you. And so to alleviate those risks, to mitigate those risks, you enter into a contract with an insurance company where the insurance company gets pertinent information from you, early on, and then offers to cover certain enumerated risks for a price. And that price that you pay is the premium, and then the insurance company takes that, and hopefully you don't have any claims made against you, but to the extent that there are any, the insurance company, gets involved to analyze the claim. If it's a third-party claim, maybe defend you in a lawsuit or try to settle a claim on your behalf or otherwise adjust a claim.
And why did you decide to focus on insurance, and why do you like doing it?
Well, I wouldn't say it's not the reason I went to law school. I don't think that it is for most people, but you come into the practice and you learn. I didn't know anything about legal practice. I'm the only, one of two lawyers in my family. Everybody else pretty much is a doctor, so I didn't know anything going into it. My idea of what a lawyer was a DA or a public defender getting in front and dealing with criminal law, and that was most of it. And honestly, that's what I was interested in doing. And then when we came out of law school, the world melted down the last time, and we needed to find jobs. And I found that the world that I was dealing with before I joined this firm had some insurance-related litigation going on, though I was doing a lot more of entertainment work. But how did I come to fall into and love the insurance practice that I do? The answer is I found this firm. I was already sort of familiar with this type of work. I'd done types of this work. I'd been in a few major cases involving insurance coverage issues. I liked it. I found it was challenging. It was analytically interesting. And also it's incredibly important. Insurance is something that everyone has, that everyone needs. And insurance is really the driving force behind a huge amount of law and litigation. Even if a case that comes down doesn't say that there's an insurer involved, very often there's an insurer behind the scenes who's dealing with it. And so you have the opportunity to sort of work off a basic framework of law and of principles, but applied to 1,000,005 different factual scenarios, which is really interesting and really challenging, and I find it a pretty fulfilling practice.
Cool. And this concept of insurance coverage, you practice in the field of insurance coverage. Could you briefly explain, what does that mean? What is insurance coverage, and what are these disputes that arise out of insurance coverage?
Absolutely. So, like I was saying, insurance is a financial contract. You enter into an agreement with a company, an insurer, to cover certain losses subject to the terms and conditions of the contract. Now, these are complicated contracts, and they're long contracts, and they're contracts that have a lot of different parts, and all of those parts are there really for a reason. A lawyer who's smarter than me in the appellate world made a point once that maybe is a little glib, but basically says the best way to understand what a contract says and what a part of a contract means is read the whole contract. And at the end of the day, that's really what you have to do to understand what an insurance policy does. So there's a lot of different components to it, and I could go through all that with you, but I don't think anyone would going to find that particularly interesting. But ultimately, you've got the types of coverages that are being sold. You've got the specific terms and conditions for each of those coverages. You've got exclusions from that coverage, so carve-outs of types of things that the insurance company is not going to cover. And you also have endorsements that modify the policy's coverage in different ways. And insurance coverage is the analysis of how all of those provisions interact, again, taking into account, as you always have to do, the applicable law of the jurisdiction that you're in, to address a loss or a claim.
Yeah, and look, you mentioned like, oh, not everybody would be interested. And granted, it could be a really boring ass subject, but it has huge practical implications, and pretty much the entire business world is looking to attorneys like you to figure out what the heck is going on. So it could be...
Right. I mean, I look at this whole idea of a coverage dispute, and the first thing that jumps into my head is, how is a business owner supposed to shop for a policy that would cover something like a pandemic and know that that's what they're insuring against? Even a sophisticated business owner can find this stuff extremely confusing.
Absolutely. And listen, a lot of insurance lawyers are going to find this stuff extremely confusing and do. I don't think, and listen, anyone who doesn't find it confusing right now is either missing something or is just a liar.
Right.
The answer is, and I'm sure we're going to get there, what's going to happen with all this, I couldn't tell you. And the short answer is I don't know. The long answer is I don't know, and it's going to take several years and a lot of rounds of litigation.
Let's put it in context, though. So what?
Sure.
So now we have a global pandemic. We have hotel chains. We have fast food restaurants.
Yeah.
We have hospitality, stadiums. We have every business that's been greatly affected. What are the potential areas of dispute, if you could just put it in context for people? So maybe just give an example of, let's say, a fast food restaurant or a restaurant, or any example that you want.
Sure. Restaurant's a great example because a restaurant has a few parts that are actually really interesting and applicable here. So there's lots of different types of insurance policies. California itself recognizes something like 17 or 18 different types of insurance coverages that may have changed since whenever I first read about it, but in that ballpark. And the big focus that everyone has right now is on a type of coverage called business interruption coverage. So if you're a business, you will typically buy an insurance policy from an insurer that covers your BPP, business and personal property. So it covers your premises. It covers the assets that you have in that premises. If it's a restaurant, it's going to cover your appliances. It's probably going to cover, usually in a smaller amount, food for a few reasons that aren't that interesting.
Cash register.
Right, cash register. Improvements that you've made to place. If you've got a lease that requires you to make repairs in the case of an accident, an insurance policy will often cover that. These are all coverages that are negotiated and dealt with. And to Lewis's question earlier, hopefully you get a good broker, a good insurance broker to help you walk through this. And there are some great ones and some not great ones.
Really bad. Like, there's people that just sell policies and they have no idea what they're selling.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, that's a facet of human behavior that's not limited to the insurance world, though it's certainly
Absolutely.
there. But turning back to the restaurant question. So if you're a restaurant owner, you've probably got at least two policies of insurance coverage. You've got a liability policy, which protects you if someone slips and falls and breaks an ankle, whatever, in a hallway. And you've got a business and personal property policy that covers, losses if there's a fire in the kitchen, if there's an electrical outage, if someone, and this is a case that I dealt with, if a guy crashes his car through the wall. Sorry, am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, you are. We got to spice this up a little bit. We got it's insurance coverage.
Listen, that's a great point. I dealt with a case where a guy straight up crashed a pickup truck through the wall of a business, and you have to deal with that.
Yeah, dude.
And so, and that's the type of thing that's typically covered under insurance policy. Business and personal property policies also can include what are called business interruption and extra expense, or as the things that you'll often see. And what that is it's a facet of insurance coverage that if there's a loss that's otherwise covered for your business, so let's say a fire, right? Your fire decimates your kitchen. It's going to take you 2 weeks to clean it up and another couple of weeks to get certified and get all the appliances working up and whatever else. During that time, you're making $0 because your restaurant's closed. So during that time, you'll typically be seeking, if your policy has it, business interruption and extra expense coverage. So the extra expenses, the expenses that you had to incur to fix things up and to deal with your business, that's or the extra expenses that you incur as a result of this damage. That's sort of an oversimplification of it, not quite accurate, but basically for
It's
what
okay,
we're doing
we get
here,
the point.
that's it. And what business interruption covers you for is the amount of money that you would be making but for this incident. So I've got a matter right now where there's a major case of vandalism and water damage at a restaurant or a nightclub. And the coverage provided for a certain category of business interruption, which was loss of rent. So the coverage is written to the landlord who owned this business, or who owned the property. And he was making a bunch of money a month in rent, and when the place was trashed, he couldn't generate rent because he wasn't able to rent it out to anybody, and so he makes a claim for coverage. That's a classic type of business interruption. So you've got lost rent coverage, you've got sort of just general income coverage. So again, in the case of a restaurant, let's say your restaurant turns a profit of $1,800 a day. That might be high, but let's call it that. If you've got an $1,800 a day profit that you're ordinarily making and you can't run the business for 10 days, that's $18,000. And you're going to hope that your business interruption coverage covers that. And for a lot of types of events, it will. Here, we've got a type of situation that's never been addressed really in the first party business interruption world, because the last time there was any sort of pandemic like this that caused shutdowns was 100 years ago, when insurance policies were wildly different than they are now.
Okay, and so what are the big issues that are going to have to be dealt with right now?
Sure. So the one of the main ones that's being dealt with right now, and there's been a dozen articles that I've read on it from really excellent lawyers on both sides, talks about the sort of initial coverage question. So a business interruption coverage doesn't cover you for every type of business interruption. It covers you for business interruption losses that result from an otherwise covered cause of loss. To give the 10,000-foot overview of what that means is every business and personal property business interruption extra expense coverage has a form that says here are the types of losses that are covered for your policy to trigger. Typically, they require direct physical damage and direct physical loss. And that's in every word in every insurance policy has been fought over by creative lawyers on either side in jurisdictions across the country. There are sort of ridiculous examples that sort of only a lawyer could buy into. And then there's a lot of practical ones. So what does direct physical loss mean? That one, I think, is more straightforward. It means something was physically damaged. So if a car drives into your restaurant, that's a pretty easy one to show. There's been a physical loss there. If your restaurant's been flooded, there's a physical loss there. If your restaurant's caught on fire, there's a physical loss there. But in most circumstances, the COVID-19 crisis is not necessarily causing direct physical loss to a business. Now, I've heard, again, in the restaurant context, some people arguing that, well, the damage is that we had to shut down, which in turn caused our stock, our property, our food. So you've got meat, you've got produce, you've got liquids, you've got oil, whatever. Those things can have a shelf life, and they go bad. Now you've got physical damage to some stock. Is that something that might be covered? The answer is I'm not sure. I have my own personal views about what really direct physical loss has to be, and what the precipitating cause of that physical loss needs to be to trigger coverage. But I'd be lying to you if I told you that I could predict how this is going to shake out, because this is a pretty unprecedented situation. So
if you're listening to this and you haven't figured out that if you have an insurance dispute, you need a lawyer.
Yeah, you need a lawyer.
I think it should be clear by now. If your head's not spinning already. Okay, so what are some of the
Yeah, my head's actually spinning right now. And so where are insurance companies going, from the plaintiff's lawyer's perspective, going to walk into bad faith traps? And tell us what bad faith is.
Well, and what is bad faith, and what types of disputes do you see already arising, and how do you see this playing out?
So I can give you the legal description of what bad faith is. What bad faith is stuff that you learn sort of early on in law school. Every contract carries with it what's called the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, which means when you're engaged in a contractual relationship with somebody else, you are every contractual relationship, every party to a contractual relationship has an inherent obligation to deal in good faith with the other side. That doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It means you have to if you're going to disagree, you have to do so reasonably. And that's sort of the important trigger where they need to understand. What bad faith is, is the textbook definition of bad faith in California and most states is that an insurance company has unreasonably deprived a policyholder of benefits due under the policy. In the first party context, benefits are typically money being paid, but not always. There's a bad faith case that involves just an insurance company being completely unreasonable in an investigation and in negotiation with their insured. They basically looked at it and they said, well, we're not going to really do anything about this. We're just going to offer you some money. We're going to lowball you and try to get you to settle so that you don't have to fight over it. And they were found liable for bad faith. So bad faith means that an insurance company needs to act unreasonably. In the world that we're looking at right now, in the COVID crisis, I don't know what's going to be deemed to be reasonable or unreasonable.
Well, are there any claims that in your mind, are there any coverages in your mind that clearly cover this pandemic?
Well, my understanding, though I've not actually seen a policy on this, but my understanding is that there are insurance policies that are specifically written to cover pandemic or virus issues. Again, I think those are offered really in very unusual
limited
circumstances, because that's not a typical coverage. It's not something that someone would typically buy, because the back to insurance being a financial contract. You guys are lawyers. You need a CGL policy to cover your office. You need auto policies to cover when you're driving. You probably need it to, for employees, you might want to consider at least getting an employment or professional responsibility policy. And lawyers need to carry malpractice insurance typically.
The only story I've even heard of anybody having it is I think Wimbledon supposedly paid $2 million a year for the past 17 years. So they paid like $34 million, and then they're going to collect like $150. And I was like, look, whoever bought that policy,
and I'll tell you, I'm close family friends with another family in the Valley here. There's a woman named Nancy Sher Cohen. She's an exceptional policyholder lawyer. She's been involved in major cases for 30 years. and she advises the Los Angeles Olympic Committee on their insurance coverages. And I wouldn't be surprised if she advised them to do something similar, because even though it's incredibly unlikely, and even though you're paying a huge amount of money like Wimbledon was for this coverage, the possibility, however remote, of this loss may have made it make sense for them to buy this type of coverage. And to your point, yeah, maybe Wimbledon is out $40 or $50 million over the last decades on buying these policies, but in 1 year, Wimbledon makes 9 figures of income, and so it was a great choice by them to do that. I'm not personally familiar with that, but I'm not surprised at all to hear it. So that's the type of coverage that probably, it sounds like, again, I don't know the details of it, but that's the type of coverage that sounds like it would necessarily, it would almost certainly apply. If you're buying coverage for pandemics like this, you better expect that you're going to get insurance for it. But the area that's seeing a lot of media coverage here in the United States and in California is sort of the more ordinary policies that people have, and whether, with creative lawyering, you can try to manufacture a claim for losses that maybe the policy wasn't necessarily supposed to cover in the first place. I don't mean that to denigrate that type of thing. Creative lawyering is what drives, the law. Without creative lawyering, pretty much every case that we ever talk about as being something worth celebrating wouldn't exist.
Right.
But
Nate, here's my question. I guess what the thing that you always think about with insurance is it money's coming in, and there can never be a time where a massive amount of claims go, like the earthquake or pandemic, because the argument is the insurance companies go bankrupt. How could there be any type of coverage that could possibly actually be used here without insurance companies going bankrupt? Like, how it just
that's
doesn't
a great
seem
question.
Like
I think the answer is probably there isn't. To your point, the insurance industry. Listen, the insurance industry is profitable. It makes money. It makes a good amount of money. If it wasn't profitable, it wouldn't exist. The way that insurance business is run, sort of the golden number that people look at for insurance is, there's a few. There's retained premium. There's a bunch of other things. But the big number that people talk about is called loss ratio. What loss ratio is the amount of money that's paid out in claims and adjustment expenses and litigation, basically managing insurance claims, against how much money the insurance company derives by writing policies and generating premium. So let's say there's a company that writes $100 million of insurance in a year. They generate $100 million of premium. If they paid out $90 million of claims that year, their loss ratio is 90%, and they've made a profit of $10 million on that premium. That's not the only way that insurance companies make money, and that's an important thing to talk about and think about, but I think that's sort of a side point here. To your question, if insurance companies across the United States had to pay out a business interruption claim on every single business interruption policy that they've written as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, they'd all go bankrupt. It's not tenable. We're talking about, you were talking about billions of dollars at the outset of this episode. I think it's a lot more than billions.
And so from a litigation management perspective, because plaintiffs' lawyers, I'm seeing them advertising left and right for these cases. Sure. Is this the sort of issue where insurance companies will settle these claims at a discount while the litigation is rolling through the courts? Or is it more likely they draw a firm line in the sand, we're not paying anything till we've had some rulings, even though the courts are closed?
I can't predict that. I think that there's going to be situations where, listen, every single case is different. If there's a case where there's a close call, or if there's a policy that's written in a weird way, because not every insurance policy looks the same. Most insurance policies have pretty standardized language for a lot of reasons, but there's lots of policies that have slightly different wording. If there's a policy out there that, maybe is sort of a closer call, an insurance company might not want to litigate that one because they don't want to create bad law. But that's sort of an open question. I think the answer, Louis, is right now it looks like they're fighting it. If you follow the news, there's a local lawyer who we all know well named Mark Garagos, and he is sort of a fabulist a lot of the times, and he likes to make a big stink about things, and he was making a big showing about making a claim against his insurer, which I think is Travelers.
Yeah.
And today or yesterday, I saw that Travelers hired Ted Boutros, who's one of the 10, 12 best lawyers in the country, or best appellate lawyers, I should say, in the country, to head up an argument against him because, to your point, they're drawing a line in the sand. They're saying, we're not going to get steamrolled on this. We're not going to, we're gonna establish that we are in the right to not agree to cover this type of claim, and they're clearly willing to put money into that.
Don't you think their entire business model is on the line right now? Even if they are successful in defending it, they're going to have so many lawsuits. You're going to be super busy.
And yeah, that's true. And I've joked with other people about this. We're not even seeing the tip of the iceberg yet about what's going to happen. A few of my clients were named in class action suits brought by various plaintiff lawyers earlier this week. Everyone's taking a look at that and seeing what happens. But I think you're exactly right. When you're talking about any business, when any business is facing an existential threat of facing a legal issue that has an existential threat from, any arguments that are going to sort of undermine or torpedo their entire, I don't know if business, that might be a little strong to say it undermines their business model. I don't think it does. The business model is a sound business model. This is just
I mean to say their existential threat to their business.
Right. If you're talking about something where...
Or a line of business for a lot of these carriers. The reality is these carriers are broken into different subsidiaries with different lines of business, so they could pretty easily stay operational while killing one aspect of it.
And that's true, but that's not good for anybody because, that's easier said than done. It's not really, some companies will try to do things where they'll just say, all right, I'm not saying some insurers, I don't think that, it's very uncommon for that, but even if an insurer were to say, well, fine, we'll take the L on that entire line of business and, fold up the subsidiary company that wrote that particular line of business. First of all, a creative plaintiff's lawyer is going to try to go after the larger organization, and I don't know if they'd be successful or not. Because these are my clients, I would hope not. But I also just don't even think that that's a particularly likely thing because there's a lot of good reasons for insurers to continue keep those subsidiary companies in existence. There are insurance companies where my clients, they're companies that are actually writing the quote unquote paper that these policies are written on. Those companies don't have any brand name awareness. They're not in the public sphere at all. These are just companies that have written policies for a long time, so they have a long track record of this insurance claims history, which is important for the other side of the insurance business for being able to purchase reinsurance, for being able to sell bonds, for being able to invest. You need that sort of stability. So I think it's very unlikely that type of thing is going to happen. But even if it did, most states have what's called an insurance guarantee association. It's a quasi-public entity. So California has CIGA, the California Insurance Guarantee Association, which is there to basically be a backstop in the event that an insurance company goes bankrupt and folds.
Yeah, we've dealt with them because a lot of there have been insurers that have gone bankrupt,
right?
And that are handling claims that we're handling, and we're dealing with CIGA, and it's a nightmare.
I can't imagine you having a great time with them.
I've been seeing some mention of a civil authority type coverage. Can you explain what that is and how you see it playing out?
Great question. Yeah, and that's something that's also coming up a lot in these discussions about whether that might trigger business interruption coverage. So I'm glad you asked it. So what civil authority coverage is, again, as I was saying before, these business and personal property, business interruption, extra expense coverages have forms within them that explain what types of losses, what types of causes, of loss are trigger coverage under these policies. And one of the subsidiaries in a lot of them is quote unquote civil authority coverage. What civil authority coverage usually says is something to the effect of it includes as a covered cause of loss business interruption that results from the actions of a civil authority prohibiting access to your business, right? So
then how could that not be triggered by stay-at-home orders?
If you're talking about like shutting non-essential businesses, that definitely sounds like that. However, civil authority coverage almost always, I'm not aware of any that doesn't, they require the civil authority shutdown to result from direct physical damage to some other property. So for instance, if the government shuts your business down because of a drug ring that's being operated out of the back, that's not a civil authority shutdown that's covered because there's not a direct physical loss that's occurred elsewhere. The government shut you down because you're running a drug ring out of the back. The area where civil authority coverage comes in is, I think that there were some civil authority cases that arose from like the LA riots in 92, though I might be wrong about that, but more commonly for hurricanes, right? Hurricanes are an area where civil authority coverage comes in. So even if your business may not have been damaged in the hurricane, if there's, a massive problem somewhere else and the civil government shut down your neighborhood so that they could get emergency services there, you're typically going to have some civil authority coverage for that. Now, civil authority coverage is usually really limited. It sometimes is limited. It's often limited in the amount of time that it applies, in the amount of time before it starts. So for instance, it's usually, this isn't so relevant here, but it usually is like 24, 72-ish hours that the shutdown has to be ongoing. The civil authority shutdown has to be ongoing before your policy is triggered. But again, that's an area that a lot of lawyers are looking at here, and they're turning over. And I suspect that's going to be an area of a lot of litigation.
All right. Well, we'll come back in 2027 when the litigation really starts ramping up.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say it's not done then.
But in the meantime, let's go to our deal of the week. So, Louis, tell us, what is your deal of the week?
Bicycling. The roads are empty, you still need exercise, and it gets you out of the house while maintaining social distancing. Do it.
Okay, mine is Fauda. It's on Netflix. This is the best show pretty much ever. It has a couple things that would make me not want to watch it, may make you not want to watch it. Like there's no star power. There are subtitles. But this is one of the greatest, most suspenseful, entertaining shows you'll ever see. 3 seasons, so about 36 hours of just, it's the Palestinian or Arab-Israeli conflict in the most sort of like non-political way that conflict can be shown. And it's incredible. It's a must-watch. Nate, what is your deal of the week?
My deal of the week is The Last Dance on ESPN. I think many of you, are missing sports, missing basketball especially. And it's a great time for those of us who were young and didn't really appreciate the full arc, the competitiveness, and the complete, psychotic nature of the Bulls and Michael Jordan during, one of the great stretches in all sports ever. And it's an incredible show. The first 2 episodes were this past weekend, and I can't wait to watch the rest.
Okay, so legal tip of the week. It's presented to you by Smith & Benowitz, which is a firm that does employment, personal injury, and class actions. Louis, what is your legal tip of the week?
If you still have to go to a non-home workplace, don't be afraid to complain. in writing if you believe your employer is doing unsafe things that increase your chances of getting COVID-19. You and your coworkers do not deserve to get sick. It's also illegal for your employer to retaliate against you for complaining about unsafe working conditions or working conditions that you reasonably believe are unsafe. So protect yourself and your coworkers.
Nate, you got a legal tip of the week for us?
I do have a legal tip of the week for you guys. Listen, this is a time where we've got a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions. Call a lawyer. If you find any lawyer who's halfway decent is going to give you a little time up front to sort of help you out with something, you can find somebody you trust who you trust is going to give you good information, good advice. Call a lawyer and ask a question. Don't talk to your idiot friend who was on LegalZoom one time. Don't read a Wikipedia article. Give a call to a lawyer who you trust, who's a good person.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm gonna double up that legal tip of the week. There are so many people, it just baffles the mind. You know, they don't understand that they can get a free consultation with an attorney. They somehow think that they need to research legal issues on their own, or they talk to their Uncle Billy, and Billy's got some ideas about how they should pursue their claims. Just call.
Right, Billy once saw a verdict and once thinks every case in that category is worth that verdict.
I saw some guy on the People's Court, he did it that way. So, listen to all the Billies out there. You've got some good old boys you can call, and girls. There's some nice attorneys that will take care of you, and sometimes they don't even charge you up front, like Smith and Benowitz. So, here's my advice for you guys. Call a lawyer. You got nice men and women like Nate and Michelle from our office. But the bottom line is, I want you to call an attorney, just like Nate suggested, because they're available, they're competent, they went to school, they can help you. And we love to be a resource for people. Even if we don't handle the claims, we will help you find the attorneys. We got smart men and women who will serve you at this great time of need. All right. Nate, what did we learn? We learned that you need a lawyer when you're dealing with insurance matters. You should not be doing this on your own. And we learned that The Last Dance is a great show that we should watch when it becomes fully available. We want to watch Fauda. We want to bike like Louis. And I want to let the people at home know, if they want to talk to somebody about insurance disputes, how do they get a hold of you, Nate?
Google Nathaniel Braun lawyer. There's actually not that many of us, thankfully. My website is selmanlaw.com. You can look me up there. I have a LinkedIn. Again, Nathaniel Braun, Nathaniel Braun.
Okay, so listen. It was really great having you on, Nate. We really appreciate it. You're going to be a busy man for quite some time. And we'll see you next week, LawFlip.
Turn the game upside down. LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down.
Okay, so Ariane, they're asking where they could find us. So for LawFlip, it's at LawFlip and LawFlip.com. For Smith & Benowitz, our law firm, which does personal injury, employment, and class actions, you can find us at Smith Benowitz and SmithBenowitz.com. For the personal stuff, like where you're really going to find the juicy stuff, at Benjy Smith and BenjySmith.com. At Wages Guru and LewisBenowitz.com for Louis. Oh, so LawFlip is produced, directed, and edited by the young legend Ariane Tabibian. Visual effects and compositions by another young legend, Oren Azad. Intro music provided by Practice. Practice, what is it? Premium instrumentals for upcoming artists by the music industry's top producers. For more info, visit penpracticemusic.com. I had so much fun recording the intro song with my man Hilton Deuce Wright. Looking forward to hearing more and more from Pen Practice. So the LawFlip identity, this hot logo that you're looking at, created by Garrett Whiston and Travis Nagel. Special thank you to Shai and Seth from the Horwitz Marketing Agency. A huge thank you to Aaron and Vanessa from Smith & Benowitz for endlessly dealing with all of our podcast bullshit. And lastly, a huge thank you to our beautiful wives, Julie and Lisa, for supporting our vision, and all the love to all of our four boys combined. Disclaimer, this podcast is made available by Smith & Benowitz for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is only intended to provide general information and opinions about legal and other concepts, and is not intended to be used as a source of legal advice or relied on for legal advice. By listening to this podcast, you understand that no attorney-client relationship is being formed between you and Smith & Benowitz or any of its attorneys. This podcast should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice from a licensed professional attorney in your state.